We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.
Welcome to Planet Holyrood. I'm Paul Hutcheon, political editor of the Daily Record. I'm joined this week by Hannah Rodger, who's the chief reporter at the Sunday Mail, and we've got Ben Borland, who's the editor of the Scottish Daily Express, with us again after his performance last week. So Monday morning, I was wondering to myself, is it going to be a quiet week? And then I got my answer just before noon. Boom, an Instagram post by Nicola Sturgeon confirming that she was going to be separating from her husband, Peter Murrell, who had also been the chief executive of the SNP. Now,
can we just clear something up? Is it Murrell or Murrell?
I always say Murrell.
I say Murrell.
Murrell.
I always thought it was Murrell. Murrell, I didn't know that. There you go.
Peter Murrell.
Peter Murrell.
Like a mushroom.
Well, each to their own. If you think it's Murrell, then you can go for it. Sounds more exotic.
Yeah.
It does, doesn't it?
Look, on one level, man and woman decide to get a divorce. It happens every day. So who cares? But, Sturgeon and Murrell were no ordinary couple. They led the SNP for, I think, about 9 years between them. It's a big story, isn't it?
Well, it is, and it isn't, in the sense, I think, as you say, man and woman, man and man, woman and woman, whoever is splitting up, who really cares? But because they were such a, they were the SNP jointly for so long, and subsequently, all the Operation Branchform investigations, etc. I think that's why it makes it so newsworthy. And, whether Nicola Sturgeon, her supporters like it or not, really anything Nicola Sturgeon does at the moment is newsworthy. People are interested to know because she made herself such a dominant figure in Scottish life in general. So people do want to know what she's up to and what she's doing. And I think clearly, she is aware of that to the extent that she chose to share it on Instagram,
Yeah, I mean, got to be careful what we say about this subject for a variety of reasons. But if you're John Swinney, things are looking up for you. You've steadied the ship. The opinion polls look good. You don't really want Nicola Sturgeon back in the headlines because right now, for whatever reason, whether it's right or wrong, she is a political stink bomb.
She is, yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. You don't want Nicola Sturgeon back in the headlines, but it's unavoidable that this process, the Operation Branchform legal process, is going to play out, and there's no way of avoiding it. Either, whatever happens, it's going to make headlines. Nicola Sturgeon said herself that they've been separated for some time. I'd love to know. I think that covers an awful lot of ground, that phrase. I'd love to know what she means by that, but obviously she's not going to expand anymore. So this had to come out. There's clearly been press photos of Nicola Sturgeon leaving a flat owned by her friend Val McDermid while she's been working in Edinburgh, staying in Edinburgh, as all MSPs do. I think sources close to the couple have said today that actually they're still cohabiting up in Broomhouse in Glasgow. So obviously there's interest. There's always interest in major politicians' private lives. Look at Boris Johnson and Carrie. Look at Tony and Cherie Blair. There's always... the higher profile you become, the more interest there is in your private life. And you just can't say it's private, leave it alone, because you've used that relationship to propel herself up in the world, both in politics and in the world of celebrity. So there is a legitimate interest in it. So
do you not think, though, people are asking why now? Why has she chosen that Monday morning, 11 o'clock or whatever, to announce? And I'm not quite sure what my opinion is on it. It could be that, someone has asked a journalist has said, oh, why are you spending so much time out with your normal residents? And she's thought, I should probably say something. Is it because, there's been a lot of scrutiny about comments made to do with Alex Salmond? That's another theory that is trying to distract from that. Is it something's happened with the police investigation? Is it just that she decided, do you know what, I'm going to do it today?
Could just be new year.
Yeah,
and
new year, new start.
Exactly.
New year, new start for the pair of them.
Yeah, but I do think that Nicola Sturgeon doesn't do anything for no reason.
But
That's all I will say about it. She doesn't do things for no reason.
The furore surrounding Alex Salmond and Moira Salmond very pointedly said those criticising her late husband should step back and stop making the family's pain worse. She didn't mention Nicola Sturgeon by name, but it seemed
Well, it's pretty obvious that's who she was talking about.
That's who she was talking about. But Sturgeon herself started that in the FT interview. She didn't need to speak about Alex Salmond. She didn't need to bring that up. So it's almost like she's created another row at which she's at the heart of. When, had she not agreed to the interview with the FT, Nicola Sturgeon is slowly starting to fade into obscurity in terms of Scottish politics. We're now on the second FM after her, the second SNP leader. She should be moving into the background, but it seems to me that she can't. She's starting to think, I haven't seen my name in the papers for a while. I better get onto the FT, do this big, wide-ranging interview where I drop all these bombs about various topics, which then put her back in the headlines.
There is a certain degree where she's, she wants to position herself as, some sort of author or, authority on literature, books, etc. So she has to maintain that public
she does, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Persona. She cannot just say, I am taking myself out. And that's why, you see her and Val McDermott doing this comedy festival. I mean, you can say a lot about Nicola Sturgeon, but I really, really question how funny Nicola Sturgeon is. Does it
The
really
fact that she
warrant...
is doing it is quite funny.
The fact she's doing it is hilarious, but whether the finished article will be as hilarious, I have no idea. But to me, it seems like a bonkers thing for Nicola Sturgeon to do. But, the fact of the matter is she does need to maintain relevance. She does need to still be in the public eye. And, the cynical people could say, oh, well, she's dropped these stink bombs or whatever you want to call them. And to make herself relevant again, I'm not so sure,
So look, Operation Branchworm's ongoing. Peter Murrell's been charged. She hasn't been charged.
Yeah.
You can speculate about whether that had put pressure on the relationship. No one will know, but I think in a broader context...
Well, you can speculate, but...
Yeah, of course you can speculate, but I think in terms of lessons to learn... Let's just go back to 2014. Nicola Sturgeon takes over from Alex Salmond, decides that her husband, Peter Murrell, is going to stay in post and as chief executive, and they run the party as a husband and wife team. Now, I just think that looking back at her leadership, that was her biggest mistake, because any sort of public organisation to have a husband and wife at the top raises clear issues about accountability, conflicts of interest, balances of power. I just absolutely. It was a crazy decision, and I think that the SNP are still counting the cost of that.
Yeah,
agreed. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
I think back in the Alex Salmond investigation, where we were told that Alex Salmond went to the Sturgeon Murrell house for a meeting to discuss the allegations that were being investigated against him. But because it was a Scottish government matter, Peter Murrell left the room and then didn't speak to Nicholas and didn't say, oh, what was Alex doing here?
Yeah.
I know.
It
just never smelled right.
No, and even if that was the case and that actually they did behave that way, it still doesn't, and I hate this phrase, but it doesn't pass the smell test. People are still going to say, well, really, you expect us to believe that, none of this stuff was ever discussed because there was, you know, you had to keep it separate. People will not believe that. And I think, you know, the thing that I find very interesting about that decision, the fact the two of them were at the head of the SNP, you know, was that no one really seemed to question it.
I can only think of Kerry McCaskill gave me a quote on the record when he was still in the SNP questioning it, but that was the only time anyone went on the record to me.
Yeah.
I just think, looking back, it was extraordinary.
Yeah.
The fact that it was never... I mean, Salmon said that he
Had
queried
said,
it, and that seemed to cause a bit of bad blood, and Peter Murrell looked all hurt.
But he did say this well after the fact.
Yeah.
You know,
And
whereas
it was
at
privately.
the time,
It was privately.
Yeah. But I just think, you know, what are you people doing in the SNP that literally nobody questioned this at all? But I think as well that kind of signifies the stronghold that Nicola Sturgeon and Peter Murrell had over the SNP, and it was, you know, people have described it as a sort of cult type situation, but it really was sort of do not speak badly of the leadership, do not rock the boat, and, you know, it did work for them for some time until it really badly backfired.
It spoke to a style of leadership that was secretive, centralised, not trusting. I mean, I think Nicola Sturgeon probably had about 3 or 4 people in her circle. She didn't open up to people. And, okay, look, she was a phenomenally successful politician in an electoral sense, but I think many of the problems with her style of leadership came back to haunt her, and that was top of the list. Just that lack of separation between government and party. It was just... I mean, imagine Keir Starmer said, look, I've got a new General Secretary of the Labour Party, it's my wife Victoria.
Yeah.
People would be like, are you crazy?
Yeah.
It's just not on.
I know.
No,
I mean,
so-
there is like nepotism a lot in politics, but that was so obvious and for all to see that it was almost so obvious that people just thought, well, they're not trying to conceal it, therefore it must be okay.
Although he was chief exec, I mean, he was chief exec for a long time. He was chief exec before they got together.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
You know, I think 2001 and they got together in 2003.
But you could argue as well it's not necessarily healthy for an organisation, any organisation, to have the same chief executive for such a long period of time.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
Yeah, there's
so
an argument for saying that when a new leader comes in, you get a new chief executive
Exactly,
as well.
exactly.
Yeah, I think so.
But clearly it's not had that big an impact on the SNP in the long term, given the poll that came out.
Yeah, so the poll, I mean, fascinating again. It was a Survation poll, I think commissioned by a different podcast and also True North.
A rival podcast.
Yeah, we're not going to name it, but a rival podcast. And basically, it's a good poll for the SNP. They won 53 seats according to this poll, Labour 24. But of more interest was Reform, who were predicted to win 15 MSPs along with the Tories on 15, so joint third. Now, what's interesting about the poll is that if you add up all the numbers, it gives a narrow pro-UK majority. I think it's 66 to 63. So if Anas Sarwar on these numbers wanted to be First Minister, he would have to get Reform MSPs to vote for him in the FM vote. Mm-hmm. And I think you can see the perception issues with that one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's hung parliament. There's not really. I mean, there's a pro-UK majority, but I mean, it looks like another SNP minority if these results were with very few. You know, with that would also mean a referendum's off the table for another 5 years, which, you know, I'm sure it is anyway. But Holyrood was designed for results like this. I think part of the problem is that Russell Finlay talks about the cosy left-wing consensus, but that's split by the nationalism question. So Labour and the SNP just can't agree, so you're never going to get the left aligning because there's a chasm between them on this one central thing. Whereas the right could agree, you know, Reform and the Tories, but then, you know, they're going to be well short. So what do they do? Prop up Labour when you've got Labour in?
I know, but that's the thing.
Just
So let's
a mess.
say it works out that way, 66 to 63. Doesn't Anas Sarwar basically hold his nose and have backroom chats with the Tories and Reform to get him over the line, or does he basically realise it's untenable and that it would be a massive backlash if he's put into power by Nigel Farage?
Yeah, I think the second option. I mean, not that... I don't think he would... Well, maybe he would have to ask permission from Keir Starmer. I don't know, he wouldn't like me saying that. But, I mean, I can't see, Scottish Labour being allowed to form any sort of coalition, whether formal or informal, with Nigel Farage's party. I just can't see it.
And I can't see... I mean, I think that's actually more likely than with the Tories. Because Kemi Badenoch's in opposition. She's not going to want her Scottish party propping up a Labour government at Holyrood while she's trying to oppose a Labour government at UK level. I just think...
And also to see the damage of that for the Labour Party. It's like a kind of the micro version of it is like in Aberdeen City Council when Labour and the Tories joined together and it caused absolute chaos. All these Labour councillors get chucked out of the party, and it was a long-running saga, and people were saying, you've joined forces with the Tories. Can you imagine years and years down the line, Labour wouldn't hear the end of it?
And Reform would torture Labour. It'd be like, look, Mr. Sarwar, we're considering voting for you as First Minister, but we need you to phone Nigel Farage. He's got a list of demands on net zero, migration and public services.
Yeah.
What time are you free to meet? It would just be a nightmare.
Yeah. So, the chances of, if that poll is accurate, which it's just one poll, obviously, and there's plenty of time. But
that's what I was going to say. It's one poll. I think it's overstated the SNP.
I think it's maybe overstated Reform. I mean,
I think Labour and the SNP are closer than that. I really do. I don't think there's 30 seats between them at Holyrood, is there?
Well, that's the thing. It's that.
Well, I mean, I think the Tories won, was it 31 last time? Mm-hmm. So if you think about just the right-wing vote split in two, 15-15, gives them pretty much what the Tories won in 2021. So I don't think it's that far out.
On Reform and the Tories, I just don't think... I don't know.
But then
Is Labour really...
But then Labour would have to be taking seats from somewhere else.
From the SNP, surely. I mean, that's what they did in the general election.
Well, I dug a bit deeper into the Survation poll, and Scottish Labour are doing particularly badly among one particular age group. Guess which one?
Scottish Labour.
Pensioners, perhaps.
65 plus.
Yeah. I wonder why that is.
I wonder why that is,
Yeah, winter fuel allowance, anyone?
WASPy.
I mean, I could do an entire Planet Holyrood on the WASPy thing because I am absolutely furious. I just think it's complete hypocrisy. And it is actually shameful. They should be ashamed. But anyway, so I'm not surprised that pensioners are all pissed off.
Speaking of which, Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who was entirely responsible for that winter fuel payment decision, although I would imagine it was signed off by the Prime Minister as well. Things are not looking too good for her. Some of the economic indicators and stats are pretty terrible. The cost of government borrowing is going up. There's a suggestion that they're going to have to make deep cuts in order to make up for the higher borrowing costs. And there's even chat that she could get replaced at some point, even this year. I mean, Keir Starmer's proven himself to be a pretty ruthless political leader. I mean, is her head on the block?
Yeah, 100% is. I think, if you look at what Rachel Reeves has been in the headlines for since she became Chancellor, none of it has been good. She's made a lot of decisions which have been unpopular. She went to China, and all that was, when the economy was seen to be like crumbling, whatever. You don't want a Chancellor who's in the news for all the wrong reasons. And I think, and she was also in the news because she dyed her hair a different colour for about a week. I mean, really, are these the things that you want your Chancellor to be promoting? I don't think so. And it's a shame because as Shadow Chancellor, she became Shadow Chancellor in May 2021. I thought she was actually really effective as Shadow Chancellor. She came across quite authoritative. She made good points against the Tories. And she spent 3 years being a shadow to a job that she now has that she might not even last a year in. And I think it is a real shame. But and part of it could be that she is taking the blame for unpopular decisions that are having to be made. But unfortunately, names the breaks.
I mean, I'm not sure how it works, but I'm pretty sure Keir Starmer signed off all these decisions. Chancellor is still answer to the Prime Minister. So these three huge errors ultimately come down to him, but he seems desperate to put them on her. I think she's I think she's toast. I mean, I said last week I wasn't even sure Keir Starmer would last the year as PM. I look at Pat McFadden and I see a Chancellor in waiting.
Yeah, I was going to say Pat McFadden.
If not PM in waiting.
I think that her big mistakes were before the election or after the election. I think she boxed herself into a corner in terms of options by ruling out rises in NI, reversing the Tories' NI policies, income tax, corporation tax. She comes in, she has to make big cuts and her options are limited. And she's had to go for some pretty terrible things. I mean, you look at the winter fuel payment. I don't know how much it's saving. Is it like £1 billion? I mean, the amount of flack she's received for £1 billion, terrible mistake. I think the NI rise on business, that goes contrary to everything she's said about economic growth.
Yeah.
It's just, right now, it's not working. I'm not saying she's not going to turn it around. Maybe she will, but it's looking pretty gloomy for her, I think.
I think as well is, whether it's true or not, I think when you are in government, you have to take responsibility. And the Labour government so far, their reasons for making all these, abhorrent decisions is to blame the Tories. That game is done. You cannot continue to blame the people who came before. Whether it's their fault or not, you are now in charge. So you have to take responsibility yourself.
I think equally, and again, I'm not going to sit here and defend Liz Truss.
Please do.
Or even to an extent,
That's Russell Finlay's job.
Even to an extent, Boris Johnson. I thought it was a very, very different, interesting Prime Minister.
A clown. He was a clown.
Absolute crazy clown.
Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt were running a tight ship, and I've sat here before many times. We've argued about this. They were doing a good job. The economy was slowly recovering. And I think this bears it out, that actually the previous administration, the Sunak-Hunt administration, now looks much, much more efficient and
No, they weren't as appalling as what preceded them, but they were still bloody awful.
You might not agree with the politics, but the way they ran the economy was better than the way Starmer and Reeves
said
are.
they were running the economy. If we're to believe what Labour has said subsequently about the state of the finances, it seems like they were just kind of covering all that up.
There you go, as the if we are to believe.
They'd spent the reserves about 3 times over. Immigration and asylum was just a complete shambles. Yeah. I don't think they left the country in a good position at all.
I think they left the country in a
better position compared to what Liz Truss would have, but I mean anyone could have.
Yeah, like that, a child could have.
But I just think, like you said, she was a good shadow. Keir Starmer seemed like a PM in waiting, and I think they've been found out that this job isn't as easy as perhaps they thought it would be. Just because you some super brain doesn't mean that you're excellent at politics.
Super brain, chess master.
Chess master. Just, Starmer's, great thinker. He's no charisma. Reeves has got no charisma. I mean, Pat McFadden, like you say, I think he looks like the Chancellor. He also looks a lot like John Swinney. Two peas in a pod, but two sensible guys,
Can I just throw in this curveball? There was a former Tory MSP, Brian Menteith, had a column this week, suggested that Reeves be sacked and that Starmer put Gordon Brown into the Lords and make him Chancellor. Oh, what do you reckon?
Nah, I mean, I think actually I would love that. But A, Gordon Brown's not going to do it. And B, if that were to happen, it kind of says that Keir Starmer doesn't think that anyone else in his party is competent enough to do that job, so he has to bring in someone who previously did it. It would just look bad.
It would. It looked terrible. I reckon it'd be McFadden or Streeton.
McFadden, yeah. I don't know if you saw on the wires before we came in, Ian Murray's been at Holyrood speaking to MSPs, and he was asked about Rachel Reeves, and he said she's been doing a fantastic job.
She's going to say that.
Launched a full-throated defence. Well, you could duck it. I mean, Keir Starmer didn't say she's been doing a fantastic job.
Well, if someone asked me how well do you think Ben is doing in his job, I would say fantastic.
He's doing a fantastic job.
Fantastic
job.
That's very loyal. Well, if I'm doing as good, let's hope I outlast Rachel Reeves.
Yeah.
So that's the.
Yeah, I got the feeling we're going to be talking about her next week and the week after as well.
Look forward to it.
Yes, indeed. So I think we'll maybe wrap up there. Thanks again to Hannah and to Ben for this episode. You can listen to Planet Holyrood on Spotify or Apple Music, or watch it on the Daily Record YouTube channel. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok for the latest news and the best bits of the podcast.
We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.